Welcome to the What If It's Not Depression podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Achina Stein. Today, we're going to talk about meditation, breathing, and heart rate variability. You probably are wondering what that is if you haven't heard about it, but you're going to have the soup to nuts approach on this by a gentleman by the name of Rohan Dixit. Rohan Dixit is the founder and CEO of Lief Therapeutics. It is a digital mental health company built around a breakthrough wearable device. He is formerly a Harvard and Stanford neuroscientist, and his work has been featured on the Today Show, CNBC, and The Atlantic, Rolling Stone, NBC, CBS, and Forbes magazine. And I think you were even on a TED Talk, if I remember seeing you on there. If you are listening to this podcast, everybody, please click the like button if you like it and subscribe. Welcome, Rohan.
So great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. I was really inspired by your story, and which is why I wanted you to come onto my podcast, and how you found ways to resolve your own symptoms of depression and anxiety. And I would love for you to start there, because it is my mission to let people know that there are solutions, and it doesn't have to be medications and psychotherapy alone. There's lots of things out there that can help people to get better. And sometimes you have to search for them, but it's my mission to sort of let people know about all of the possibilities, not just finding root causes, but also solutions. So let's start there.
Yeah, I think it's a great place to start. And, I've been very open that I've struggled with depression at different parts of my life as well, and have found a lot of benefit from techniques that are not maybe, the traditional way of treating depression. And yeah, I'd love to talk more about it.
Yeah. So I think you mentioned to me that you had started having depression as a teenager. What was going on then?
Yeah, I think that adolescence is a time where a lot of people run into mental health problems for the first time. Obviously you've got hormones and social dynamics, which are challenging for anybody. But I think, that was true for me as well. And found myself struggling with anxiety and depression, was lucky enough to find a book lying around the house about meditation. My mom is into meditation. And that was really the beginning of my journey into learning about alternative ways to understand my mental state and shift it.
Mm-hmm. Great. So where did you go from there? You learned meditation, and then somehow or another, connect the dots for me on how you ended up making this device.
Yeah, the dots, looking back, it's easier to connect than looking forward for sure. But yeah, so I started with really trying meditation, with an open mind. I didn't, I was always a very scientifically minded person, and gave it a shot, and it helped me a lot. It made a big impact in my life. Sometimes I say it changed my life, and in some ways it may have even saved my life. And so it made a huge impact. And I think what I realized then, and why I ended up going into neuroscience and studying this more, was that something must have changed my brain. And so I sort of, that was the beginning of my research into mindfulness, into mental health, and then eventually building products around teaching people and helping myself to kind of internalize some of those skills as well.
Mm-hmm. Great. So, from what I heard about you, you actually created this in your garage. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. Typical Silicon Valley story. So we started in my garage, building prototypes, and luckily our landlord didn't kick us out. But yeah, that's where we started. And today we are, a medical device company. We are working with companies like CVS and Optum, and just trying to sort of get, some of these tools out there where mindfulness is the base, but the technology that we're really using are, things like biofeedback, and specifically heart rate variability biofeedback, and really getting those to more people in a clinical setting, right?
Yeah. So why don't you tell us more about what HRV is?
Yeah, it's not something that everyone's familiar with, but I think more and more people are measuring HRV or heart rate variability on their watches, on their rings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Heart rate variability. So yeah, for your audience or anyone who hasn't come across this before, is really the timing differences from one heartbeat to the next. So it's kind of right there in the word, the heart rate variability, the variation. And it turns out that that variability actually indicates quite a lot about your mental state, about your what's known as your autonomic nervous system. And it has all kinds of insights that it can provide to you into how you're feeling and maybe even a way to change how you're feeling.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah. There are other devices that also measure heart rate variability that's been on the market. One is called HeartMath. How would you compare Lief to HeartMath?
Yeah, I love HeartMath. They've been in the space for years, and yeah, I think the differences in approach between what we're doing are, we've really focused on a clinical grade tool. So we are an ECG. We have a class 2 FDA medical device. We can hook up to your doctor. And we're covered by most insurance plans as well, which helps with affordability for some people. So yeah, we've sort of taken an approach of, one, can we make a really, really high quality product based on science and publish, evidence around it and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And two, the technology itself is built around a feedback loop, which hasn't existed before. And so, I mentioned that I started
Mm-hmm.
my mental health journey with meditation. What is meditation? But really understanding, developing mindfulness of how you're feeling and learning techniques then to shift that mental state. And so what Lief does really well, which is our product, our biofeedback product, is that it can kind of understand how you're feeling in the moment. It can personalize to your patterns and know when you need help and turn on in those moments. And what's interesting about the Lief is that it uses haptics or vibrations to actually communicate with you. So even if you're in a stressful situation, or maybe you're feeling a little bit of a fight or flight, for example, if you have anxiety, this is also true with depression, you're able to feel the device start to vibrate and you simply breathe along with it. And what the Lief does is it allows you to train yourself through breathing and through biofeedback to change your HRV, get it back into a good zone, and then it turns itself off. And those little micro moments throughout the day is really the experience that you get as a user and as a patient.
That's really awesome. I love everything that you said about that for several reasons, because there are lots of people who learn how to meditate and they meditate every day, even for 30 minutes, 40 minutes is what I understand is the sweet spot, so to speak. But then things happen during the rest of their day, right? And they're reacting to the situation, their heart's racing, their adrenaline's rushing, and like, why am I meditating? It doesn't even help me for the rest of the day. And so what you're talking about is a device that's kind of tapping you on the shoulder, so to speak, and saying, hey, breathe, breathe right now. Now's the time to breathe. Now's the time to be aware. Now's the time to ground yourself. And I think that's really, really brilliant, to be able to, in real time, be able to be sort of tapped on the shoulder, so to speak, and reminded to listen to your body and do something about it in the moment. So that's beautiful. And I don't think there's many other devices that do something like that, that I can think of anyway. So yeah, I love that. I love that because one thing about meditation is that it is something that I recommend every single one of my patients to do. I'm always giving them videos or instructions and breathing and meditation, not just meditation. And it's something that there's a huge learning curve, right? It takes years to really master it, honestly. So, and if you're already stressed, to try to push that down or be able to respond in the moment, a lot of people aren't able to settle themselves enough to be able to even put themselves in a position to even start meditation, right? So does this device help with that as well, to even sort of bring someone down?
It does, and that's such a problem for anyone trying to learn meditation, right? Am I doing it right? It's hard to get feedback. You end up feeling frustrated. It's hard
Mhm.
to build the habit. It's hard to know when you should be meditating and how. I mean, all of these challenges end up
Right.
making it really, really challenging. I mean, when I studied meditation in the lab, we had these very tightly designed studies. Like you have to meditate for X number of minutes every single day, and here's the protocol. And
Yeah.
what I realized working in the laboratory is, yes, you can use those protocols. You can see changes happening in the brain. It's incredible what attentional training practices and breathing can do. But there's a gap between that and the real world. How do you actually do it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. People struggle with the monkey mind. Yeah. They really struggle with the monkey mind. The other piece of that, unfortunately, is that, part of breathing and meditation is it kind of forces you to stop and allow for emotions to come to the surface, and that might make people uncomfortable. So sometimes people have that monkey mind, or do, go, 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 because they're avoiding certain emotions that are difficult and uncomfortable. So I'm curious if you find that when people use your device, if that becomes not a problem, but an issue, maybe, and that makes people uncomfortable in that way. Because sometimes people do certain things to avoid emotions that might be, based in a previous trauma in their life, or conflict, so to speak. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's such a nuanced point. And it's true. I think that particularly in the early stages of building a meditation or a contemplative practice, right? And I have so much empathy because I've struggled for so long to do these things as well, and build habits like this. I think one of the big challenges is that not everybody is actually ready, or may even be in a safe space to start unpacking some of what's happening. And particularly if you're dealing with trauma, um, you can be protecting yourself, and that's okay. Maybe now's not the right time to um, uh, open up, for example, severe trauma that's in your past. And I think it's really important that people give each other um, compassion and some leeway and say, look, I feel ready, or no, I don't. And really use your own instincts as a guide, because I think one of the things that you'll see first when you start slowing down and watching your thoughts, and then sort of letting what is underneath come to the surface, is that it can be challenging, and it may not always be pleasant. And I think the process ultimately can be helpful, but it's definitely not going to be necessarily easy the whole time. And so I think that's something that people should be aware of.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And uh, with certain patients, I do warn them about that, and also inform them why it's been so difficult, possibly for them when they've tried. But I guess the question that I'm asking you is, I'm curious about whether or not the Lief application actually assists with easing into that, given that situation. Do you notice a difference where it's actually easier for people to manage their emotions going into that, especially if they have some kind of trauma history?
I think that in general, the approach that HRV biofeedback, heart rate variability biofeedback broadly takes, that's a little bit different from mindfulness, right? And other types of meditation, is that it, rather than focusing on the mind, there's a real emphasis on the body.
Mhm.
And that can actually be helpful in situations like this, even if you are dealing with trauma. And of course, this is something to talk about with your doctor, and really explore for yourself and make sure this is true. But I think what many people have found is that biofeedback, and we can talk about what biofeedback is, and
Mhm.
what the mechanisms are for it, rather than getting in the monkey mind, it really takes the approach of saying, look, our emotional state is not just our mind, it's not just our brain, but it's also our body.
Right.
And how can we get into our body and learn to breathe and shift our physiology, that then in turn has this effect on our mental state? That doesn't necessarily mean we need to open up the whole can of worms, from a cognitive perspective or semantic perspective, but just, yeah, feeling different. And that can be very physiologically driven, which can help.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. And, trauma, the body keeps the score, and trauma can be, in parts of our body. And I think with breathing and, your whole being, connecting to your whole being really can make you transition a lot easier through trauma. But I think awareness is the key, having that awareness around that. Yeah. So with, when we talk about heart rate variability, can you talk about, what is considered normal? And, I like to talk to people about, getting themselves into parasympathetic mode, but we don't necessarily live there all the time. We do have to be able to respond to everyday stress and things that happen on a day-to-day basis. And that's where we want to have a normal heart rate variability, right? And respond to stress in a healthy, resilient way. And I think if you can talk more about what heart rate variability is and how it changes, and what's considered a normal response, that would be great. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, heart rate variability is, like we talked about, this measurement of your heart, right? And it turns out that your heart and your mind are actually intricately interconnected, and one can affect the other. And so what heart rate variability can show you is a window into how your body is reacting to stressors around itself. And you're absolutely right. You don't always want to be in a parasympathetic rest and relax mode. Sometimes there's a tiger behind you and you need to run. And that's a good thing. And so I think one of the misconceptions that sometimes our users and patients have is that, oh, I always want to have a high HRV. And that's not true. What you want to be able to do is that if you are in a chronically activated sympathetic state, let's say you're chronically stressed, right? That manifests as a lower HRV. There are lots of studies, even now great meta-analyses, looking at HRV and depression and showing that whether it's anxiety, whether it's depression, even things like addiction, PTSD, bipolar disorder, there's a variety of mental health conditions where your heart rate variability is actually downregulated. And I think now what some of these great studies have been showing us, there's a meta-analysis that came out a few years ago in Nature showing that, in a dozen studies, if you use biofeedback to improve your HRV, you can really shift how you are feeling in that moment. And so heart rate variability can be this window into, one, developing mindfulness. I think that's the first step, right? How does my body really affect my mind? And the second thing it can do, particularly if there's a real-time component to it, which is something we've really focused on here at Lief, it can give you the ability to intervene in the moment where you need it and shift your state and actually see with data that you're getting better, right? And that is this key feedback loop that allows you to track your progress, know you're doing it right, and actually get the full benefit of the therapy, for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Great. So this data is, you can actually get this data for yourself in real time.
Yeah, that's the trick. And you mentioned starting in the garage in my house. I think that was what I really wanted for myself. I had worked with meditation and mindfulness for years. I think that the challenges I ran into are the same that many do, which are around knowing how am I meditating? Am I doing it right? When do I do it? And I just was, really searching for something that would be with me all the time and intervene and help me build mindfulness and interventions in the moments that I really need it, and it's made a big impact on me. I think there's been many instances in my life where just shifting how I'm feeling physiologically and how I'm breathing and how I'm, in my body or not, has led to me being able to connect with people better and have better conversations, and I would imagine better outcomes.
Right. Yeah. So I would love for you to tell the audience about what it is exactly, because I know what it is, but for people to know that it's something that you actually apply on your chest, right? And it goes on your left side of the chest, right under the heart or above the heart, right? Do you have a device? Can you show us a device so people can see?
Yeah, I'm wearing one now, but I'm looking for for another model so I don't have to flash your flash. Yeah, this is what the device looks like. It's an EKG. It's a flexible electrocardiograph. I think that typically people associate that with cardiac conditions. Maybe, you're having some trouble with your heart, your doctor might give you an ECG, right?
Right.
Um, yeah, but I think what we're seeing now more and more in mental health is that this can be an incredibly important way to understand and track your mental health symptoms as well. Yeah,
Right. Right. So you apply it on your chest,
right.
and how does that provide information? Is there an app that you put on your phone?
There is, yeah, and maybe it's worth taking a step back just briefly to talk about biofeedback
Sure,
for.
go right ahead. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I mean, just in case there's anyone that hasn't come across this in the past, I think biofeedback is something that's not very well known, but incredibly powerful technology, right? So biofeedback, the initial experiments, in the 70s were around fingertip temperature, and I tell people the story sometimes to give them a sense for what biofeedback is and why it's so potentially powerful for mental health. Those initial fingertip experiments asked people to either raise or lower the temperature of their fingertip through their conscious mind, right?
Mhm.
Which is impossible. We don't have any ability to control our fingertip temperature, but it turns out if you have a digital thermometer that's very accurate, and so it's accurate and you're looking at it in real time, you're seeing little degrees go up and down, fractions of a degree even. Your mind, through processes that we still don't fully understand exactly how this is working, through some mix of conscious and subconscious processing, you can learn to control your fingertip temperature consciously.
Mhm.
So that's biofeedback. It's almost like a superpower. What do you do with that, though? How can you take that general idea and then apply it? That's where heart rate variability, HRV, is so interesting because it's this very robust measure across many mental health conditions that's low. And if you can teach yourself through biofeedback to actually improve that signal, and so we teach people to breathe, the device, when you're wearing it on your chest, it will know when your HRV is very low, it'll turn on, it'll start to vibrate, and you'll breathe with it. And that feedback loop is super, super helpful. And yeah, that's kind of how our product works. And I think um, maybe part of the reason that people get benefit out of it because they're able to, in the moment, change their mental state and shift how they're feeling just through something as simple as breathing and biofeedback on this really important and super interesting biomarker too.
Mhm. And does that change pretty rapidly, the HRV?
It can, yeah. So, I mean, you and your audience may be familiar with things like the Aura Ring, Apple Watch,
Right.
right? A lot
Right.
of people are measuring HRV now, which is so great to see. Some of the challenges with the other wearables that are out there that aren't clinical grade, aren't ECGs, is that the data quality is not super high. It's not very, very accurate. And so that's one of the things that we focus on with Lief, because with biofeedback um, and generally, if you're wearing a device for mental health, we all know that our mind shifts in just a couple of minutes. I mean, you can have a tough conversation, you can realize you forgot something,
Right.
or reminisce about something that it feels bad, and so your mind can shift so quickly. And what's great about an ECG approach to measuring heart rate variability is that you can see in your data little tiny micro fluctuations throughout the day and really take advantage of that, because when your HRV is low at 8 a.m., it may not be low again, until 3 in the afternoon. And how can you really target your interventions to only get at the moments where you need it most? I think you need to have a accurate real-time measurement for that.
Right, right. Yeah, that's great. So how would you typically, I mean, I think you just gave an example, but my question was going to be, how would you recommend someone typically use this device on a day-to-day basis? You gave one example, maybe you can give another example of how it's useful.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you from my own experience, and then I can talk about our users and our patients too. So um, I mean, I was very open even in the beginning of this podcast. I've struggled with mental health issues, particularly when I was a teenager. But I think that some of these things are lifelong practices. And so the way that I use HRV biofeedback, the way that I use my Lief, is I'll put it on in the morning and sort of like wear it throughout the day. What we've done, which is unique in the biofeedback space, is we built a lot of these algorithms and machine learning algorithms to actually know, oh, this is your baseline for HRV. And what you can do in the Lief app is sort of set thresholds. So you can say, okay, well, I want to get feedback when I'm in my 5th percentile of HRV. And I want to breathe until I'm back in my 10th percentile. So you can sort of, for you, set how much feedback you want to get and when. And that's how I use the Lief when I'm in a stressful situation. Like I'm actually getting biofeedback right now if the device is turning on, because I'm trying to think what I want to say, and am I saying this the right way? Is this going as well as I want it to? And that's just so real, right? And I think what it allows you to do, and what it's helping me do in the moment, and helps our users do as well, is, oh, it gives you that little bit of space to say, huh, my body's reacting in a way that I can have sympathy for and empathy for, and let me shift how I'm feeling and give myself a little bit of space.
Right. Awesome. So you've talked about low heart rate variability, and obviously you want it to be normal, in the normal range. Is there anything about high heart rate variability? Is that an issue, or can you talk about whether or not that's something that people need to be concerned about?
Yeah. HRV. Yeah. I mean, there are cases where, you don't want to have a very, very high HRV. There are certain situations where, people have things like syncope, and you may get lightheaded and faint. And I think those are pretty rare. But it is something to be aware of. Really, the best HRV is probably in your normal zone and maybe a little bit higher. And what we really focus on at Lief is like, how can you take your baseline and just shift it up by like 1%, 2% every day, and compound those changes over time. So yeah, high HRV, not always good. Typically is going to be, what you want, but yeah, there's nuance there, and moderation in all things.
Great. Yeah. So yeah, we had originally talked about having this interview before. I mean, and suddenly you popped up onto my schedule, so I didn't have a chance to actually get the device to try out for myself. I love trying out things before I actually interview people, but I hadn't had a chance to do that. But I'm so glad that we made this happen. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about was your experience with working with Himalayan monks. I think you were out there in India in the Himalayas for what, 9 months or so?
Yeah. I'm happy to talk about it. Kind of an incredible journey. So, I mean, I was in the lab, right? Studying the mind, studying mental health broadly. And I'd always been interested in mindfulness. And what I found was that, people might be able to resonate with this, with building a meditation practice. I think we've all read in like the New York Times or wherever that, yeah, you should probably meditate. It's probably a good idea. But I think, the gap between that and actually doing it and seeing a difference in your life is pretty big. Like usually you never cross that. And I just got to a point in my life where I was like, this is really important to me. And I want to shift how I feel. I don't want to just learn about why meditation helps. I actually want it to help me, I
mean, it's funny how, it's a good point that you make, that so many people learn all sorts of things. They're so highly educated, but they don't actually do it. Right? It's action that's really, really important, putting things into action. Yeah. And you did. Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't easy, but I gave it a shot. Yeah. And so that's where, my trip to the Himalayas came. I think I had been looking at mindfulness and meditation from a very academic perspective, and so sensors, biosensors in particular, are starting to get cheaper. And I'd always imagined, even from being a teenager, that something must have changed in my body and brain. Like, I bet you can measure that. I bet you could build a machine that would help you do that, and I'm just a tinkerer and an inventor. So that made me really curious. And so I bought a one-way ticket to the Himalayas. I went to Dharamsala, which is the place where the Tibetan government in exile is, and the Dalai Lama is. because, I've been aware from my work in neuroscience and meditation that the Dalai Lama does a lot of that work too, and
Yes.
works with a lot of neuroscientists, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I started there and then traveled all around India and met a variety of different types of monks, recorded their brainwaves, their heartbeats, lived in a cave, spent time in a ruined monastery deep in the mountains, and all kinds of amazing experiences. Met incredible people, but
Oh, that's
yeah.
awesome. Sounds really exciting. I just came back from Calcutta for my nephew's wedding. And so it's the last time I was in India besides this past December was back in 2010. So where my family's from the west side of western side of India and Goa. So yeah, it's a great experience being up there. That's going to be my next stop is the Himalayas. Next time I go to India, it'll be there for sure.
It's beautiful. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah, and even if you can't go to the Himalayas and learn from monks, I think part of what we try to do with biofeedback and what mindfulness. There's so many mindfulness apps out there as well.
Mhm.
You don't need to buy technology. You don't need to pay money to learn how to do some of this stuff. I think it's yeah, you can get a lot of benefit without needing to go on a journey through the mountains. You can just start where
Absolutely,
you are.
absolutely. Yes, I do recommend quite a few different apps. A lot of them are free and, but there's some great things out there. But I feel like this part of, of what you're bringing up, it's something that you can put on your body and it gives you feedback in real time about breathing and about, just pausing, so to speak, shifting as you talk about it, tuning into your body and shifting, giving yourself some space, I think is really, really important because, doing the 1 hour meditation every day sometimes just doesn't really handle the day-to-day stresses for some people. It's just not enough.
That's
So
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
it really isn't enough. So I appreciate your work, and I also appreciate you sharing it today, and hopefully people will benefit from that. I'm sure people already are benefiting from that, and thank you so much.
Such a pleasure to be here and talk about some of these things that I love so much, and I hope it was helpful for you, your audience.
Yeah, thank you again.